My dear brothers, it would be good tonight to understand what consciousness really is. Many believe that through the law of evolution, we can attain the inner self-realization of the being, and that, of course, is a mistake. We do not deny the law of evolution. It is obvious that it exists, but it is absurd to attribute psychological aspects that this law does not possess. Obviously, after any ascension, there comes the moment of descent. It would be absurd to think of an infinite ascension. If we ascend to the top of a mountain, it is obvious that we will have to descend. The laws of evolution and involution are similar, my dear brothers. There is evolution up to a certain limit, and then the processes of involution appear. Observe what happens in a plant. It is obvious that when the seed germinates, there is evolution. When the stem is growing, it is possible to see the impulsive, evolutive forces of nature. This evolution exists. In plants, for example, when the vegetable starts to bear fruit, etc. Later, the processes of involution appear. And then we see how the leaves dry up to the point that this plant becomes a group of dried leaves. That is the force of involution. Observe, my dear brothers, what happens with the human being. It is obvious that inside the woman there are evolutive processes when she is pregnant. The baby, when born, is in evolution. When we pass through the processes of childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, there are evolutive processes. But later, the process of involution appears. Then we see that the person, little by little, is becoming older, like a plant in a process of deterioration. And finally, he grows old and dies. This is the crude reality, brothers. But to think that the laws of evolution and involution have other psychological aspects is absolutely absurd. When we read all the different theories about evolution, it is possible to understand how artificial that dogma is. The human mind is already so deteriorated that it does not even see the destructive processes, the processes of involution on a global scale. Let us observe the intellectuals. They mistakenly confer the destructive processes of involution to the law of evolution. It is truly absurd to refer to involuting and degenerative processes as evolution. It is the truth. People are totally trapped by the dogma of evolution. What we need, my dear brothers, is to separate ourselves from the mechanical laws of nature, from the laws of evolution and involution. Those laws are the mechanical axle of the machine that we call nature. But if we do not separate ourselves from those two mechanical laws, we will remain trapped by samsara, inside the tragic wheel of life and death. We need to walk the path for the revolution of consciousness, but this path does not align with the laws of evolution and involution. The Divine Master already taught the path for the revolution of consciousness. It is the narrow and difficult path that leads to the light, and there are few who find it. Jesus did not talk about 3 paths, or 5, 7, or 12, as many think. Jesus talked about a unique path, narrow and really difficult. The great Kabir Jesus did not promise the kingdom to everyone. If we study the 4 Gospels carefully, we can see that the Master remarked how difficult it was to become part of the kingdom. It is said, many are called, but few are chosen. But when we talk about the chosen ones, we think it's us. The Protestants, Catholics, and everybody else think that because of their membership in a religious group or sect, they are already selected. No, my dear brothers, we have to be more serious with our thoughts. In order to be selected, it is necessary to attain the second birth that was described to Nicodemus by Jesus. Remember, my dear brothers, what is written in the Bible about the conversation of Nicodemus with Jesus? Rabbi, we know that thou art a teacher come from God, for no man can do these miracles. And Jesus answered, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Therefore, if we do not attain the second birth, it is not possible to become part of the kingdom. It is important to attain the second birth, and this is not possible through theories or intellectual beliefs. Nature speaks for itself. Let us look at the plants and creatures. Birth is something perfectly natural, and the second birth is based on the same forces of nature. Many times we have talked about the three factors for the revolution of consciousness: to die. Yes, it is necessary to die. The ego has to die, the myself, the I, to be born. The solar bodies have to be born within ourselves, because only in that form is it possible to attain the incarnation of the being. Sacrifice for humanity. It is love. We have to sacrifice ourselves for the millions of human beings in the world. These are the three factors for the revolution of consciousness. Jesus summarizes this saying, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. To deny ourselves means to eliminate the ego, the I, the myself. To take the cross and put it on our shoulders means the work in the forge of the Cyclops in the ninth sphere, because the cross is sexual. To follow Christ means love and sacrifice for humanity. We need to work intensely on the three factors. Only in that form is it possible to attain the inner self-realization of the being. People believe that through evolution it is possible to attain self-realization. That is a mistake, because self-realization cannot be a mechanical result, even if it is evolutive. If the great mechanism of nature through evolution could bring us to the final liberation, it would mean that God is a tyrant. Because to go by force where someone does not want to go is absurd. There are millions who do not want to go even to heaven. Why would they be taken by force? Many people do not want the esoteric teachings. Why would someone have to give it to them by force? Is it necessary to change? Yes. But why should people change by force? If evolution were to transform humanity by force, then God would be a tyrant. That is absurd. God is not a tyrant. He gives freedom to everyone to choose the path he selects for himself. He does not enslave anybody, but respects the free will of everyone. Many believe that through innumerable reincarnations, it is possible to attain perfection, and that is false. People do not know the difference between reincarnation and return. The Lord Krishna, who, as you know, lived 1,000 years before Jesus, publicly explained reincarnation. Krishna did not say that all human beings could reincarnate. Krishna taught that only the gods, devas, semigods, etc. are called to reincarnate. This may be strange to many, but it is the reality. In order to reincarnate, it is necessary to have an individuality, and human beings do not have individualities. If we observe them carefully, we will see that they are full of contradictions. Everybody knows that we have many faults and try to cover them with excuses. If we could see ourselves as we really are, With all our faults in front of a mirror, we would feel ashamed observing our inner contradictions. The origin of these contradictions is the multiplicity of the I inside the 5 centers of our organic machine. We have different I's. For example, the I of the intellect says, I will study for a while, but the I of movement says, no, I want to walk a bit, and then appears a third one, the I of hunger or gluttony, that says, no, I prefer to eat. Let us see how many contradictions we have. We have many defects, and each one of them is one I. So we do not have a real individuality. These I's are not in harmony with each other. They fight, discuss, and lack order. When one of them overcomes the rest, controlling the brain and the capital centers of the human machine, we see that the person is passionate for an idea, or for a person of the opposite sex, etc. But when that ego is displaced, then we see that the one who had promised eternal love or loyalty to something breaks his promise, leaving everybody, of course, perplexed, amazed, and confused. The human body is a machine controlled by many eyes. It is absurd to think that those many eyes can reincarnate. When the time of death comes, what remains is a legion of demons. Yes, eyes demons that personify our mistakes. After some time, those eyes demons return, come back, return in new organisms. This is it. When they return, they repeat exactly the same actions of their past existences. This is the law of eternal recurrence. So the laws of return and recurrence govern humanity. How can it be possible to talk about reincarnation in that sense? Reincarnation is for those that do not have egos, for those that do not have those eyes, individuals who are only spirit, sacred individuals. The word reincarnation says it, my dear brothers. Incarnation. We already know what it means. The descent of divinity into a man. And reincarnation means the repetition of that descent in a new human organism. The problem is that in the Western Hemisphere, the reincarnation doctrine was distorted and mixed with the law of the eternal return. Do not confuse reincarnation and return. All of you return. It is not possible to say that you reincarnate because you are not sacred individuals. That is clear. If you want to reincarnate, you need to die from moment to moment. With the gradual elimination of the ego, marvelous processes appear. It is necessary to know that the essence, the psychic material, is an emanation from the universal soul within ourselves. I am synthesizing it in order to make it easy to understand. That essence is trapped inside those multiple eyes demons that we have. When we eliminate those eyes, the essence is liberated. For example, if we have a perfume inside many bottles, it is obvious that when we destroy those bottles, the perfume is liberated. The same happens with the consciousness, with the essence trapped inside the eyes. As we eliminate each eye, the essence attains its freedom and takes a concrete form. The first thing that we crystallize is the famous seminal pearl from Taoism. Later, through time, the seminal pearl is transformed into the golden embryo. And this golden embryo can be developed more and more according to the elimination and disintegration of the eyes. The golden embryo crystallizes a total balance between matter and the spirit. The golden embryo brings the authentic individuality. When all of the pluralized eyes have been destroyed, what remains is the golden embryo, the awakened, illuminated, resplendent consciousness. That type of consciousness is free to move through infinite space. When the consciousness awakes, we do not have problems with the astral projection. We can go in and out of our body voluntarily. It is important, my dear brothers, during the work of dying, to learn how to use the creative energy. Let us remember that in the Gnostic mysteries always appear the chalice and the lance. The chalice represents the feminine yoni, and the lance, the masculine sexual force. It is necessary to learn how to use the lance and the chalice, the masculine force and the feminine force. The great wise men of ancient times always used the sahaja maithuna to disintegrate the ease, to return them to dust. During the sahaja maithuna, in the chemical copulation, in the supreme moment, it is necessary to beg our Divine Mother Kundalini to use the lance, the sexual force, and to turn into dust those eyes that control our organism. It is obvious that with the power of the lance, those eyes will be disintegrated quickly. And at the same time, we will crystallize inside of our being the seminal pearl that later, as I said, transforms itself into the golden flower, the golden embryo. That is the mystery of the golden blooming. To those that do not have a wife nor a husband, they have to comprehend the mistake that they want to eliminate. And once it is understood, they have to beg the Divine Mother Kundalini for the elimination of the I that personifies the psychological error. The difference between singles and married people is that the latter have the force of the lance and can destroy those defects more quickly. Singles can destroy the eyes by asking the Divine Mother Kundalini for the elimination of the error that they have already understood. But when we are working on the elimination of the three traitors, or even deeper, when we want the elimination of the dragon of darkness or many other subjective elements that the human being has in the deepest parts of the subconsciousness, it is necessary to have the power of the lance during the sahaja maithuna. When the consciousness has been set free, when it is undressed in front of the great reality, then we can see, listen, and touch the great realities of the superior worlds. We become competent investigators of life in those regions. The process of death itself is really profound, my dear brothers. Regarding the process of birth, obviously we have to work with the hydrogens. Through a special shock, as I have explained many times, we make the sexual hydrogen pass to a second octave of a superior level. This second octave vibrates with the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, and crystallizes after the saturation of the cells in the magnificent and marvelous form of the astral body. When we make the hydrogens pass to a third octave of a superior level, then we crystallize the mental body. The mental body is extraordinary and marvelous. And when we raise the hydrogen to a fourth octave of a superior level, then it crystallizes with the 7 musical notes in the extraordinary form of the causal body. At this point, we can incarnate the human soul or causal, the third aspect of the Atman Buddhi Manas Trinity. Then we have a man or woman with a soul, an authentic man, a real man. But we do not get to this point, my dear brothers, through simple beliefs or dogmas or through evolutive processes. Working with the 3 factors for the revolution of consciousness is how we can walk the path that leads to the final liberation. If any of you has something to ask, you can do so with total freedom. Venerable Master, recently I have read something about the samsara's wheel, that the soul passes through different stages in each return, beginning by Aries in one return, passing through all the zodiac. Of course, the person can pass several times for the 12 zodiacal signs. What could you say about it? With pleasure, I will answer your question, my dear brother. It is obvious that human beings are born under one or another zodiacal sign. All depends on the individual karma. Here, there are no specific plans, as the author thinks. It is essentially karmic. That is what determines it. When the initiate liberates himself from the law of recurrence, the law that forces us to repeat in each existence the same situations of the previous one, then we can select our zodiacal sign voluntarily. The Hindu wisdom talks about the 12 nidanas, the 12 causes of existence. These 12 causes are related to the 12 zodiacal signs. In the superior worlds exists the zodiacal temple. In that temple there are 12 sanctuaries. And when the initiate wants to have a physical body and reincarnate, he goes to the selected sanctuary. Someone will want to reincarnate under the constellation of Leo, others under Aquarius or Pisces or Aries, etc. So when the initiate wants to have a physical body, he goes to any of those 12 sanctuaries, and there he waits for the master of karma. They are the masters in charge of connecting the silver cord with the sperm that will go to the womb. But let us pay attention. Obviously, the initiate can select his zodiacal sign voluntarily. This is what I have to say to you, my dear brothers, about the zodiac. It would be good for you to eliminate the dogma of evolution from your minds. Thank you very much, Master. Can I ask you another question? Sure. There are reasons to be concerned about the fact that in each return, we have to repeat the same acts of the previous existence. I think that there should be some variations, at least. Well, brother, in life there are exact repetitions and small variations, as you say. When the consciousness is awakening, we are also becoming more independent from the law of repetitions. And when we are totally awakened, we do not have any connection with this law. But there are people that repeat everything exactly, even in the small details. People who are born in the same town, get married at the same age, and have the same economical activities. They say, for example, at the age of 20, I will have a store. At the age of 40, I will have some children, and my life will be this way. Later, I could verify that the prophecies of those people were exact. Then, if we do not have enough comprehension, it is possible to think that those people are intuitive, prophetic, or something like that. But there is nothing of the sort. What happens is that those people, because of the constant repetition, know their role exactly. That is all. What really is important is to become independent from the law of recurrence, to be truly free. And in order to do so, my dear brothers, we have to disintegrate the ego. Because with the disintegration of the ego, we awaken the consciousness. And only having the consciousness awakened can we be independent from the law of recurrence. Master, you have said that it is possible to create the superior existential bodies of the being without the total elimination of the ego. Then, what happens in this case? Well, my dear brother, there is no doubt that there are people who create the solar bodies and do not disintegrate the ego. Because they do not eliminate the ego, they do not awaken the consciousness in a perfect and objective form. It is obvious that those people are Hannes Musen with a double center of gravity, cosmic failures. For that reason, the work has to be complete. it is necessary to eliminate the ego and create the solar bodies. With the same force that we create the bodies, we can also destroy the ego. The one that learns how to use the lance, the force of eros, can, with that erotic power, disintegrate the ego. It is important that during the sexual connection, we send the sexual forces in the direction of the Divine Mother Kundalini. It is necessary to beg in those moments to the Sacred Mother to ask her to take the lance of eros and with that extraordinary force disintegrate the ego that we have understood. In that form, we are dying from moment to moment. When we are dead, the consciousness awakes completely. It is absurd to create the solar bodies and not to die. It is necessary to create the solar bodies and to destroy the ego. Only in that form is the work perfect. Not to do so, my dear brothers, is to become a cosmic failure. You know how horrendous a Hanasmussen is. A Hanasmussen has a double center of gravity. There are two parts. On one side, the devil ego, and on the other, the secret master wearing the solar bodies, a white master and a black one. A Hanasmussen is an abort of the cosmic mother. I do not want you to fail. You have to understand profoundly what you have to do. Master, what can you say about the 108 existences for every essence and the 3,000 cycles? With pleasure, I will answer your question, my dear brother, or better to say, I will explain this aspect. Every divine monad has 3,000 opportunities. Every divine monad has 3,000 cycles. Do not confuse cycles or aeons of time with centuries. When I talk about 3,000 cycles or aeons of time, you have to understand it. Each one of those cycles includes the evolutions through the mineral, vegetable, animal, and also the 108 human existences that every essence receives. It is obvious that if those 108 existences are not used correctly, failure comes. Then the essence, the consciousness, has to go through the path of involution, goes to the infernal worlds, comes back through time, passing through the animaloid, vegetaloid, and mineraloid states. When the essence passes through the mineraloid state, the eyes are eliminated. The essence goes once again to the solar light, undressed clean, in order to reinitiate a new evolutive cycle that will begin from the stone kingdom. Then the essence will ascend to the vegetable, the animal, and finally will reconquer the human state that it had lost. When the essence has the human state, it receives, like before, 108 existences. If it uses them correctly, it is marvelous. And if it does not use the 108 existences, it has to repeat the process. If the monad does not use the 3,000 cycles, if it fails, the opportunities end, and he absorbs his essence, his consciousness, and penetrates into the universal spirit of life forever. Becomes a monad that will enjoy happiness, but will not be a master monad. That is the crude reality, my dear brothers. Now you have to know what a monad is. The monad is not the theosophical Atman Buddhi Manas. The monad is the ancient of centuries. And inside of the ancient of centuries is the Christ and the sexual force, the Holy Spirit. That is the monad. He has to send the essence to take a body in nature's laboratory with the intention of attaining a soul to be an awakened consciousness. When the human being triumphs, when the consciousness attains the self-realization, it liberates itself from the mind and transforms itself into Atman, the ineffable. Later, it is absorbed into the Ancient of Centuries. Then the Ancient of Centuries attains his self-realization is a self-realized monad. Much later, he can absorb himself into Ishvara and become a logos. He can liberate himself from the solar system. And once he is free from the solar system, has the right to live in the worlds of Paravapaba until that moment when the profound cosmic night comes. When the cosmic night comes, when the great pralaya arrives, he can absorb himself into the absolute abstract space, and there will live for 7 eternities, enjoying extraordinary happiness. After, in the new Mahamanvantara, it is obvious that he will have to come back to a new activity in order to resolve transcendental aspects of the spirit for superior order. This is something that I will explain later, because this is not the correct moment. Master, could you please explain the concepts? You have said that the monad sends the essence in order to get the soul. You have also said that a soul is possessed and spirit is. Could you explain us the differences between the spirit and the soul? Of course, my dear brother, I have spoken in synthesis, but if you want, I will explain it. It is obvious that the Ancient of Days self-emanates what we would call the spirit, the Atman Buddhi Manas. Atman is the spirit, or the being. Buddhi is the spiritual soul, which is feminine. And the superior Manas is the human soul, which is masculine. From the human soul comes the essence. Unfortunately, the essence is trapped or enclosed amongst the different eyes. When the human being destroys all those eyes, the freed essence transforms itself into the golden embryo. Much later, that golden embryo can fuse itself with the human soul. In that form, we become men with souls. That embryo has the power to transform the human soul and to make it a master soul. Much later, when we attain the incarnation of the Buddhi, the golden embryo also transforms the Buddhi, that is to say, the spiritual soul, and it becomes a master soul, and even Atman becomes a master because of the golden embryo. When the golden embryo is absorbed into the monad, that is to say, inside of the Ancient of Days, the Ancient of Days attains his self-realization. And when the monad goes even further and absorbs itself into the ray that emanates from the universal spirit of life, that is to say, the Ishvara or the inner logoi, then we transform ourselves into logos, into a solar logos, and that is the objective of our solar system. Only through a total revolution of the consciousness can we become a logos. When one reaches the logos, one is freed from the solar system. He that is freed from the solar system has the right to enter into the absolute. But in the next cosmic day, will have to come back again to this galaxy with the intention to free himself from the galaxy itself, and then he will absorb himself into the absolute. And for a third time, he will have to come back in order to free himself even from the infinite itself. Then he will be able to absorb himself into the absolute forever as a Paramartha Satya. That is to say, as a God with Christic consciousness, as an ineffable creature of unspeakable splendors, inside the unlimited abstract absolute space. This is it. Did you understand this, my dear brothers? Marvelous Master, we do understand that the monad sends his essence to nature's laboratory. We understand that the process of descent is necessary in order to learn and to attain consciousness. So later it can ascend, and in this process, our superior parts of the being can become a master soul, as you have said. It is also surprising to know that there are monads that after the 3,000 cycles can fuse themselves into the absolute, even after having been failures. We would like to know, Master, what is the reason for this plan? With pleasure, my dear brother. Anyway, the monads that fail in the 3,000 cosmic cycles are rare, but it is not impossible that some of them could fail. How important could one resplendent wave more or less be in the ocean of the universal spirit of life? It is just one wave that did not attain self-realization. That wave will not enter into the absolute, as you said, because that is for the Paramartha Satyas. That wave will live among the universal spirit of life. It is clear that at the end of the Mahamanvantara, that wave enters with all the other waves into the abstract, limitless, and eternal space of the immaterial Shakti. But it is also true that when the dawn comes, that wave goes out with all the other waves. It is a bubble in the ocean that by law has to go out. It could not remain in the absolute. Only the waves of self-realized lights can stay in the absolute. The logos that have self-realized consciousness, Christic consciousness, this is the effort that the Logos is making. I want you to know that in the depths of each one of us, there is an inner Logoi that is eager for the consciousness. The Logoi that attains consciousness becomes a self-realized Logos. And every self-realized Logos has the right to become a Paramartha Satya, an inhabitant of the Absolute. Do you understand this? Venerable Master, I want to ask you about a Mexican man that was a great socialist, that distributed the lands among the Mexican. His name was Emiliano Zapata. Does that man have a physical body? In this moment, Emiliano Zapata does not have a body. However, many of those that were with him have a physical body. They have returned to the physical world. And this other great man, also Mexican, his name was Pancho Villa. Does he have a physical body? Is he in the same condition? Pancho Villa is dead now. In the future, he will have a body. These themes, Venerable Master, are very important. We in Venezuela have always been interested in knowing about Simón Bolívar. We would like to know, does Simón Bolívar return, have a physical body, or is he still dead? About Simón Bolívar, that is very interesting, because he has a ray that we could call a liberator. It is clear that an initiate sooner or later needs that ray in order to eliminate, we would say, some inferior atomic elements, inhuman elements, etc. But Bolívar, the personality that we know as Bolívar, not the soul that was in that personality, has not come back yet. He will return, will come back in a new organism. Venerable Master, you have said that many liberator atoms that gravitate over the atmosphere of Venezuela will work again, and that now the revolution will be spiritual. You also said that many of those atoms will work for the great cause, for the triumph of Gnosis, in the new age of Aquarius. What else could you say about those atoms? Obviously, those liberator atoms are active. They vibrate in the space, in the entire atmosphere. Especially, they impregnate the mind of some individuals that have a mission to fulfill. The liberator atoms fight in order to become manifested at each moment. There is no doubt that in Venezuela they will manifest strongly. There, the liberator atoms want to crystallize, want to inundate the minds. There is no doubt that the Venezuelans can do a great work, and I know that they will do it. As in the past, they fought for the independence of 5 countries. In the same form in the future, those liberator atoms will impregnate certain minds and will help so that many commit themselves to walk the path of liberation, not just nationally, but even worldwide. Now that we are talking about those liberator atoms, would you recommend some special exercise so each one individually can attract those atoms, increasing his possibilities of development? Yes, we can attract those atoms into our internal constitution through disinterested work for the good of our fellow men. In this form, these can impregnate us radically, transform us. They can make of each one of us a real leader, a true champion of the great cause. But we have to attract them. It is necessary to love freedom, to love our fellow men, to work disinterestedly for all human beings. In this form, we can attract them. All that we can do in favor of our fellow man is extraordinary. Does there exist a yearn for liberation in Venezuela? That is the truth. That country is very impregnated by the liberator atoms, because the people of Venezuela pay homage to the figure of Simón Bolívar. They attract and inhale those liberator forces. For that reason, so much is expected from that country. There is no doubt that that country can commit itself to fight for the good of humanity. That is my concept. Venerable Master, what do you think about some sects that invoke Simón Bolívar? Well, it depends on the kind of sect. If we speak about spiritualist sects, I would have to say to you that they are subjective and incipient, because through the mediums they can just express dark entities that can take the place of Simón Bolívar, because in the inferior astral world there are many larvae and entities that can take the medium's body and present themselves as Simón Bolívar. We have to be very careful with that. In reality, only in the superior worlds of consciousness is it possible to have contact with Simón Bolívar. But in order to do so, it is necessary to awake the consciousness. Otherwise, it is impossible. That brother's question was interesting because I remember a case that happened in Maracaibo, where there was a girl that could see you visiting her to recommend some medical prescriptions. At that time, I think that she sent you a letter and you answered saying that it was your real being, Samael, that used to speak with her. We would like to know if your real being can make himself visible, as in that case. Well, sometimes my spirit can make himself visible in front of some disciples. It can be possible that they can see him. My inner being can cure at a distance, to perform good actions in favor of humanity, etc. About the girl, honestly, because it happened so many years ago, and I have lived so many psychic experiences, right now I do not remember. I would have to investigate it in the superior worlds. This is it. Venerable Master Samael, you were speaking about the god snail and the god sun. A very interesting theme that you have not explained in any of your books. Could you give us some insight about that theme? Well, that would be a very long lecture. What I could say to you now is that the god snail belongs to the lunar path, the spiral path that painful humanity follows. The god sun is different. The god sun means the straight path. So there are two lines, the spiral and the straight. There is a supreme moment for all the millions of essences that live on the face of the earth. I want to point out emphatically the very first moment that we decide to take the solar path, very different, of course, from the lunar path. To all the millions or billions of virginal sparks comes the precise moment, the critical time, where they have to decide if they will follow the solar path or the lunar path. When somebody intentionally takes the path of the razor's edge, then there is no comeback. Those that attain the mastery and later want to come back in order to follow the lunar path will have to pass frightful eternities in the infernal worlds to finally attain, after many millions or billions of years, the annihilation of the superior existential bodies of the being and the destruction of the animal ego. This means that when there exists a major grade of consciousness, there also exists a major grade of responsibility, and the one that adds wisdom also adds pain. Inferential peace.